We're almost halfway through 2025. You've been around for a long time. You've been around President Trump for a long time. Give me your take on the state of things within the Trump administration 2.0, as I call it, and what are the top priorities heading into the summer?
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be here with you. I've been around for 10 years now. Sometimes it feels like it's only been a year. I mean, just in terms of how quickly time has moved as we've gone through as a nation this incredible revolution of common sense, as the president calls it, and the birth of the MAGA movement all the way to the height of not just American politics, but world politics, right? The MAGA movement, the Trump movement, sits on top of geopolitics for the entire world as the most successful, influential political movement, changing the entire planet in terms of peace, security, prosperity. What I think about the most as I look back on this short period of time is how the president spent the last 4 years planning and preparing and getting ready for this moment, so that when he took that oath of office on January 20th, he knew exactly what he wanted to do from the moment he stepped into that Oval Office. He knew what bill he wanted to pass through Congress. He knew what he wanted to do on the border. He knew what he wanted to do on trade. He knew what he wanted to do on foreign policy, on military policy, on reforming the bureaucracy, and on fighting and draining the swamp. So we've seen more action and more activity in the last 4 months than any new administration has ever put into effect.
Let me ask you about President Trump, because as you say, you've been around for 10 years. You've seen him through a lot. What has changed about President Trump and what hasn't changed about President Trump and the way he operates in the White House?
So President Trump, I've been so blessed, so fortunate to be able to watch him as a leader up front, close and personal for 10 years, as he built the MAGA movement from nothing, from scratch. You know, in 2016, when he first ran, I think, I don't want to insult anybody, but I think pretty much every other Republican in that race was some version of an establishment Republican. That's all the Republican Party had to offer, was establishment Republicanism, status quo. President Trump blew up that whole entire failed system, and for the first time in our lifetimes, gave the American people a different choice, something other than the status quo, something other than, and I know it's a harsh word to use, but we were on a glide path to national suicide. Between open borders, between uncontrolled bureaucracy, between our total surrender on trade and economic policy, the throttling of American energy, the destruction of our culture, our education system, and the destruction of the rule of law, we were going to become a failed nation. And he changed all of that, and he offered people not just a choice, but hope. For the first time in their lives, they had hope that somebody in this system would fight for them. Nobody would ever choose to endure the 10 years of communist persecution that he, his family, his business associates, and his friends were subjected to. Watching him now be able to outmaneuver the left every single day, be 10 steps ahead of them at all times, just demonstrates how much they miscalculated by coming after him, because they've now made him far stronger than they could have ever possibly imagined. I've never seen any leader more determined and resolved to do the right thing. Whenever anyone brings him a problem set, he always just says, we need to do what's right for the American people. I don't care what they say about me. I don't care what they do to me. I don't care what I have to endure. We're going to do what's right for the American people. And that's what you're seeing every single day. The first term of President Trump was the most successful presidency that we have ever seen. But the second term is defying even the highest expectations the American people have ever had.
What do you think happens to the Democrats as a whole? They took things way too far on a lot of fronts. Where do you think their party goes from here?
Part of the reason why they have resorted to lawfare as effectively their entire political strategy is because they have an unsellable ideology. In other words, they're committed in a popular democracy. They're committed to a series of beliefs that are like 10-20% in support. So they have to be corrupt to get anything done. Men and women's sports, as the president says, completely open borders to the worst criminals on the face of the earth. People guilty of child predation, murder, even people who are guilty of violent torture and beating and killing and just senseless slaughtering. And they're let in without limitation for 4 years, right? A political party that's committed to raising taxes on everybody, right? A political party that is against the police, that wants to defund the police in your community, that wants to let rioters run free. And the punching bag for all of this are the hardworking American citizens. The people who do it right, they're the ones who are getting the brunt of it every day, economically, socially, culturally. So it's an unwinnable political message. If we can accomplish these reforms to just have a free and fair society, the Democrats are doomed. They cannot compete or operate in a fair system, which is why they have to rig it.
What are you guys doing to ensure that a future administration doesn't come in and just dismantle everything that you've worked so hard to do?
Well, it's hard for me to think that far into the future because every day is a lifetime right now. You know, we wake up in the morning under President Trump's direction, and he wants to know, what are you doing to reform higher education? What are you doing to fight violent crime? What are you doing to make our trading system fair and deal with the theft of American jobs? What are you doing to make sure that our government is responsive and accountable to the people and isn't a swampy, horrible, terrible bureaucracy? So, you know, we're so much focused on solving these crises and challenges of today. But I think my best answer to your question is that because President Trump built a movement, an entire movement, there are now a whole generation of leaders to carry on what he started and what he created.
What does restoring the republic look like? I know that's basically the overall goal over this 4-year term for President Trump. You're a big player in that. So what does that mean, and how do you restore the republic?
When President Trump talks about restoring the republic, he means restoring a country in which the fundamental loyalty and allegiance we have is to the American citizen who does everything right. And that's why the system has been such a travesty for so long, is that the people who they work hard in a job that perhaps is thankless, nobody's appreciating them. They earn enough money, barely, to support their family, to take care of their kids, to take care of their loved ones. They follow every rule, they pay every tax no matter how outrageous. And they look around them and everybody else that isn't doing it right is getting rewarded. So the scammers and grifters in Washington, D.C. are getting rich. The illegal aliens are getting rich. The criminals are getting away with everything. So this person thinks, I've done everything right in my life, and the entire system serves everyone at my expense. Restoring the republic means that the citizen, the law-abiding, God-fearing, honest citizen, is at the center of the government's priorities and allegiance. And that's what President Trump is doing with his leadership each and every day.
Now, you may not know this, but you seem to trigger a lot of folks on the left, Stephen. I know you're aware of this, but whenever you look up Stephen Miller on the internet, what you'll find online is that you actually come from a family of Jewish immigrants. Maybe you want to take an opportunity to clarify for the people out there who have painted you in a certain way what your stance on immigration actually is.
I welcome the attacks from the radical left, because if they're not attacking, you're doing something wrong. To answer your question, when my ancestors came here around the turn of the 20th century, like around the year 1900, it was understood then that if you didn't pay your own way, nobody was going to help you. You were not going to get one dime from the federal government, right? The idea that we would bring people into this country and then put them on free health care, free welfare, free everything, paid for by hardworking American citizens is such an offense. The United States has the absolute right to decide who enters and who doesn't enter. You do not have the right to come here without the permission and approval of the host government. Everyone who comes to the country has to be vetted. Under President Trump, we are going to have an immigration system that prioritizes self-sufficiency, standing on your own two legs, supporting American values, culture, history, being able to assimilate into our country, and obeying the rule of law. Because if we don't have the rule of law, we are nothing. How can we as a society tell American citizens, if you don't pay taxes, you're going to jail. If you don't obey your local ordinances and regulations, you're going to jail. If you don't listen to every instruction the government gives you, you're going to jail. But millions of people can ignore our laws with impunity, and their only punishment is a lifetime of free welfare. It completely breaks down the entire social construct.
You have these activist judges out there who are issuing these nationwide injunctions. What are you guys doing to fight back and make sure that his agenda is moving forward?
These district court judges have precipitated a constitutional crisis. So there are roughly 700 district court judges nationwide. They're unelected, they serve for life, and they operate in a comparatively small geographic area. Their geography isn't the entire nation. It's just the district where they operate. the craziest, most liberal lawyer seeks out the craziest, most liberal judge out of the 700 and says, I want you to shut down this executive branch policy nationwide for the entire country. So the president may implement a much needed reform to the Department of Education that would apply, again, to the whole country. And they can get a judge just in San Francisco to say, you can't do this for the entire country. Did the people of Florida consent to be ruled by the judge in San Francisco? There are millions of citizens all over the country who today are living under policies set by a handful of judges in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Manhattan. President Trump and his Department of Justice have gone to the Supreme Court and said very clearly, you must repair this policy. And if the Supreme Court doesn't take that action, then necessarily Republicans, both in the White House and in Congress, are going to have to take actions to more fundamentally reform the federal judiciary.
There's been buzz about this administration possibly exploring limited suspension of habeas corpus to deal with the immigration crisis. What is being considered? What does that mean?
So Congress created a body of law known as the Immigration and Nationality Act. That's the body of law respecting how you get into this country and how you get out of this country. In that body of law, they explicitly said that illegal aliens are not eligible for relief from what are known as the Article 3 courts. Article 3 courts refer to the federal judiciary. And so Congress, the phrase is known as jurisdiction stripping. They actually strip jurisdiction from the district courts on all matters pertaining to deportation of aliens. Because Congress understood when these laws were passed that it is impossible to enforce our nation's borders if every illegal alien gets a federal criminal trial. In other words, the federal criminal process, which can take weeks or months or years, is designed to adjudicate specific accusations against an American citizen for the purposes of incarceration in the United States. Deportation is not a punishment. Deportation is a civil correction. And so the discussion about whether or not habeas would be limited for specific illegal aliens, not people who have any right to be here, is solely in the context of what are the options the administration would have to look at if the courts don't obey and abide by the laws that Congress enacted. And again, the Constitution vests the executive with plenary authority over matters in the conduct of foreign policy. Immigration is a foreign policy decision. So these district courts are both violating the laws of the United States and the supreme law of the land, which is the U.S. Constitution.
But beyond the policy fight, Stephen's mission is personal, rooted in family, legacy, and the kind of country he wants his kids to grow up in.
In that regard, I met my wife in the first Trump administration. When I first met her, she was the communications director at the Department of Homeland Security. So it's very on brand, the relationship, because we were on conference calls every day on border security.
Wow. I know your kids aren't fully old enough to embrace that, but what do you want them to know about their dad and all that you've been able to do?
Actually, I do think about that a lot. When their dad had the chance, he joined with President Trump and the administration to fight like hell for this country and for the people that protect this country. That this administration, this government, this country defends and takes care of those who defend and take care of us.
And have your kids met President Trump?
Yes.
What do they think? What's the takeaway?
I'm very lucky because I have a photo of my daughter when she was a newborn meeting President Trump. And my daughter's always asking to see the president again. I have to explain to her that he's very busy. She is always desperate for any chance to get some FaceTime with the president.
And what people don't know about President Trump, you can speak to this.
Yes.
He's actually great with kids. He's like a kid magnet.
Yes.
When kids are around, they want to be around President Trump.
He's a child whisperer. The kids love President Trump. President Trump loves children. And I think that's a very important point, is that this West Wing, and the Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, has also been very clear about this too, is open to children. This is the most family-friendly work environment. You can bring your kids to work anytime you want. you shouldn't abuse this, but you can bring your kids to the Oval Office anytime you want
and
to.
drop them off with the president for a little babysitting maybe.
Right.
But all jokes aside, Stephen's bond with President Trump is one that's helping to shape the future of America for generations to come.
Finally, I know that you started early on in politics when you were in college. Would you have ever imagined Stephen Miller being in this role and playing such a big part of really restoring America and changing the future of this country?
You know, I thank God every day that I've been fortunate to be in this position. I remember very clearly the first day that I went aboard the campaign plane. And the first time, you know, I was introduced to him. The time my title was Senior Policy Advisor. I knew President Trump as, not only as the candidate, but as the business titan. He also was a hardcore fan of The Apprentice as well. So you can imagine how starstruck I was in this moment. And he immediately just put me at ease and began engaging in conversation. What do I think of the other candidates? What do I think the big issues are in the campaign? He just met me like a minute ago and listened to everything that I said. And that was, of course, the first of thousands of trips on the campaign plane. But he took a chance on me. He has always taken care of me and my family, everything I've ever needed. So my loyalty to him is absolute.
Well, you're doing great things. We appreciate all your hard work. And thank you, Stephen Miller, for sitting down with us.
Thank you.
'Cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away.